And really deep bow to everybody who's on the webinar tonight and who's going to watch this video afterwards. Guys, you can make a tremendous difference in your health by tapping into these resources. Wellspring is a fantastic organization. Obviously, Myeloma Canada has all this expertise that can help you get through the medical system, get through your treatments and so on. So I'm just really happy. I love the fact that people empower themselves, are more proactive. I really think it makes a difference in the long term, and that we are going to talk about mental health issues tonight because it's been a long go the last year and a half, and I think there's a ways to work with this. So I'd ask you, first of all, you're thinking about that myeloma diagnosis, and then you're going to hear this talk about empowering yourself in the myeloma journey. So what are your goals? What do you hope to have happen within the myeloma journey? And I'd suggest a few things. Most people would say it's pretty obvious. You want to maximize your longevity, right? You want to get the home run and live for a very long time and really have excellent physical health. So it's obvious, but there's more to life than just like staying alive and being strong physically. I'd suggest to you that as well, it's good to have a good functioning brain, have your brain work. You can think more clearly. You can do more activities. You can do more of the things that you love to do. You can function better, right? So, and what I want to do is promote all of these goals. In fact, it's one integrated package, all the above. Today, we are going to focus, however, on building resilience. How is it that you can work with the stress and uncertainty and anxiety of a myeloma diagnosis, and how can you be healthier and happier doing that? That's really the kind of the crux. And we're going to go deep into talking about these difficult issues, probably what your physicians and nurses don't necessarily talk to you about very often, but the people at Myeloma Canada, at Wellspring, that's where they can be tremendously helpful. And the fact is, you can work with these difficult emotions. They're not necessarily going to go away, but that will allow you to develop more peace and happiness on your journey. And I'm going to take it through the lens of stress, anxiety, and empowerment. So really going to talk about the tough stuff. And the fact that we're talking about it is not going to make it worse for you. In fact, it's just the opposite. When you bring up those topics and you have that open conversation with your loved ones or with a professional or the folks at Wellspring or Myeloma Canada, it actually diminishes the strength of the anxiety. So we want to go there. We want to do the difficult work, and it's going to actually help you in the long term. I believe in something called integrative oncology, which is essentially getting the best from the medical system and then empowering yourself at levels of body, mind, and spirit. It's that combination of the two that I really think gives you the best chance of that longevity and all the goals that we're talking about, right? And so the first step is the education piece and tapping into those Myeloma Canada resources, and then learning to advocate for yourself and making sure you're getting the best care from the medical system. And that's a whole other 20-minute, 30-minute talk by itself. And then we're going to talk about some of these ideas as to how you can empower yourself and how that helps with stress and anxiety and the stress part of it. Ultimately, working with your mind in nurturing a bigger perspective. So the take-home points, what is it that I want you to understand quite clearly after this presentation? You really can profoundly influence your mental health and your physical health by taking care of yourself, by doing that work, by understanding stress, etc. It really can release the healing potential within your body, so you're better able to get through the treatments. You're stronger, you're healthier in the short and long term. So you really can make a difference. Secondly, is just to recognize that the difficult stuff is going to happen. So the thoughts are going to come up, the difficult emotions like anxiety are going to come up. It's just a normal process. And I'm not here to try to make all that go away. It's just, that's not impossible. But what I can say is that we can work with it. There are techniques that allow you to say, well, this is my anxiety coming up, and what can I do about it? And by working with it, by gaining those skills that we're going to teach you tonight, you can be happier and more at peace in the long term. Okay, so we do this by touching on all these topics. So I'm overviewing anxiety. I'm going deep into the emotional stuff. Going to talk about our human brain, the fact that we have to work with our own physiology, the own gray matter. talk about setting your intention. How is it that you want to live your life, and kind of focusing there, creating the conditions for calm so you're more resilient. What to do when you do feel the kind of flare of anxiety or stress, what to do in the circumstance. We want to go to the source of this, including recognizing some of the difficult thoughts and how you can reframe that with both wisdom and kindness towards yourself, and talking about how we work with difficult emotions. So it's within the lens of anxiety and stress, but when you work with that, that will release all aspects of your healing on the journey. Okay, so it's normal. Let's just accept that anxiety happens, and it happens after a myeloma diagnosis. That's what happens when we humans run into uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know how the treatment's going to go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the feeling of anxiety is going to come up. Anxiety is normal. It has its purpose. It can empower you as well. And I'm going to say all these things just to say that there are lots of different fears that can kind of come up with the uncertainty. What is it around mortality, or fear of recurrence or progression? You thinking about the side effects. How is that going to affect your body, your mental function, your appearance, and so on. So these are all normal things that we would contemplate in the circumstance. Fear of being a burden on others, right? You don't want to drag down your family members, or you don't want to have them have a difficult experience. So in the midst of this, our hearts are open to our loved ones as well. And we don't want to be a burden. And the financial implications, the kind of shattering of expectations, all those possible fears are there. So we just, in some sense, I say this now, let's just be open and honest and realistic. That's some of the reality of each of us. To different degrees and different ways, we experience some fears and uncertainty. So that's our starting point. We don't want to, brush that underneath the carpet. We just want to accept that this can be difficult in different ways. So when is anxiety a concern, though? Because that's all natural stuff that I'm talking about there. Anxiety can actually be seen as a positive thing, right? The anxiety probably brought you a little bit to this webinar tonight. The anxiety will also have you understand that you can, for instance, exercise to whatever degree. You can, eat a better diet. You can make sure you're getting the best care from the medical system. Those things are helpful, right? So there's the motivation from the anxiety perspective. The problem becomes if the anxiety gets out of whack, excessive, and interferes with us appreciating our lives to a much more normal degree. And when we have the disturbing thoughts or feelings really interfering with our daily activities, or we get ourselves so wound up that we have physical symptoms, or we have different unproductive behaviors like withdrawing or becoming overly compulsive. And so it's really like having a clear idea, looking at yourself, what's happening, being open and honest and mindful about your experience, and to what degree is the anxiety causing a distress or disturbance when it could be in a much better balance. Now, it's never going to be perfect. I'm not suggesting that, but can we find a better balance? Can you be 10% happier, 20% happier? And obviously, when you get yourself into that rut of thinking and then bad physical symptoms, the bad behaviors, and it just can be a little bit of a vicious cycle. So let's have a positive cycle kind of on the way up, so we can appreciate our lives more and enjoy the company of our loved ones and do the things that we love to do, right? So that's what we're aiming for in this circumstance. So some unproductive thoughts, like if you're thinking about the past saying, well, I should have done this particular thing, or I should have done that within the medical system, or if only this hadn't happened in this particular way. Well, I mean, you can learn from that in some sense, but for the most part, looking at the past isn't very helpful, right? It's like, it's a negative event that we can't really change. And so it's better to look at the present moment and say, how can I grow from here? How can I get stronger from here? The attitude of, oh, I can't do this. This is too much, or however you talk yourself in a negative way. Again, those thoughts aren't going to be empowering. Instead, what is it that I have control over? How can I let my love and spirit out in this life? That's the thinking that's going to be stronger and boost your immune function and so on. And even in the future, I will never, run a marathon, or I will never, not have treatment worries. Again, focusing and ruminating on the kind of negative things is just going to detract your energy. And yes, you can be realistic and you can mourn some of those losses, go through those griefs. But for the most part, we need to focus on the things we can control, put our love and energy and attention into that, and let go of the unproductive thoughts. Okay. The other thing that comes up with anxiety is the feelings. And we can't control the feelings, but we can at least acknowledge them. Oftentimes we can get to the source of this. And so we can become overly irritable, or the feeling can come out as an anger at life, anger at the world, angry at others. When those feelings happen, stress happens, we don't concentrate as well. And just that feeling of, just not feeling right. So the feelings, the anxiety is detracting you from experiencing the things that you do appreciate within your life. And then the behaviors, one of the things is avoidance, like not going to your medical appointments. I doubt this audience would have that issue, but not kind of taking care of yourself by avoiding those issues, or isolating yourself is a real recipe for depression and so on. Angry outbursts can happen. So it's like a buildup of this kind of energy within. And oftentimes the outburst is not helpful ultimately, with either for yourself or within your relationships. Obviously, we can numb ourselves with drugs and alcohol, but again, that's temporary and has its own set of problems. Procrastination, avoidance, same idea. Compulsive behaviors. I mean, could it be, you're really excessive, ruminating over your blood results, your CBC count, or et cetera, or, you're calling the hospital every week to talk to your physician, when your questions have been properly answered, for instance. So we have to be aware of how we respond under anxiety, what behaviors come out as the starting point. So again, it sounds like a more grim talk, but really we just accept the truth of how we humans do this. And it's really very, very, very important starting point. We start fresh from there. You also think about, well, what are the things that kind of prime that pump, put you into that situation? So obviously when you're first diagnosed, and, that's the point when you want to connect with Myeloma Canada and get that information and so on. But the worry about a time of recurrence, or you're starting a new treatment, maybe you're about to go into transplant, that kind of uncertainties there. There's something called scanxiety, or, medical appointment anxiety, or especially waiting for the results. Again, you can see the kind of high risk moments within your trajectory. And you might actually even think about, if you're, get more anxiety around a certain appointment and so on, you might want to pull back on some of the other activities you have in your life, so you have more psychic energy to work with those issues, and not get yourself too overwhelmed or extended during that time. An anniversary of diagnosis, anniversary of transplant, August the 15th every year, started my transplant then, or hearing about somebody who's died or relapses also can trigger that, what could happen to me? When we have physical symptoms, whether they're new symptoms, or, you've had the previous certain feelings when your myeloma is flaring, that can also prime the anxiety. And even interestingly, like a post-transplant phenomenon can also be a very anxious period, right? Because you're trying to adapt to the new kind of physical self. You don't know how quickly you're going to recover from a transplant. There can be a loss of kind of sense of trust in the body. These are all normal things that many, many people who go through myeloma experience. All normal, all expected. So really, I start that talk just with the truth. And then we say, well, what can we do about it? How is it that we can lessen our anxiety? How is it that we can enjoy our lives more? How can we be stronger, healthier, think more clearly? And I think about it as kind of multi-stepped approach to this. The first thing is to create the conditions within your life, working with your body, working with your brain. It's almost like you're setting up the resilience by strengthening yourself so that you're ready when the anxiety happens. So creating conditions for calm, teaching yourself how to be calm. Secondly, we're going to all go through this, that there are going to be moments where, I'm feeling stressed, or the anxiety is flaring. And then how do you settle yourself down in that moment? Like when you're really stressed and flustered and scared, how do you kind of get the nervous system to settle down again? So that's a technique that we're going to learn today. Secondly, or thirdly, I would say, thinking about working with the beliefs, because it's often the beliefs, the concept, the virtual reality that we create that creates the anxiety. So if we can reframe a bigger perspective and work with the underlying beliefs, then we can actually nip it in the bud right from the get-go. And lastly, it's this radical acceptance that anxiety is normal, that we don't have to struggle with. We don't have to change our anxiety. We can simply paradoxically allow the anxiety to be there, recognize it's just an emotion, and the emotion is going to pass like a big wave that passes. And when paradoxically you're able to accept it, it actually lessens the effect of the anxiety in our lives. So radical acceptance is part of the teaching here. Okay. The first thing I would say is focus your energy on the things that are most important to you, right? So consciously, deliberately understand that life is precious for everybody. How is it that you want to use the energy that you have on the day-to-day? What's most important? What do you value? So be conscious, decide, even first thing in the morning. For me, I do like a little meditation. So every morning, my wife and I get up 50 minutes of like a meditation. It's like a mindfulness technique. And I'll tell you a bit more about my meditation afterwards, but it just like watching my breath in, watching my breath out, watching my breath in, watching my breath out. And when I start to think about other topics, planning for the day, what's going to happen with the myeloma talk tonight, I bring my attention back to my voice. So I'm practicing the muscle of mindfulness, meditation. At the end of that, I say a prayer. It actually oftentimes comes out as a secular prayer. Please let me be helpful. Let me be kind. Let me be clear. Let my heart shine. Let me bring my spirit into this world. So I'm like saying a prayer. Sometimes it's religious language, sometimes not. So I'm saying that. And lastly, I kind of do a little prostration on the spot, like little hands up saying, I release this to God in some sense, right? So there's my ritual at the start of the day. I try to remember what's most important. For me, it's to be a loving, kind, helpful, integrous person. So I really think those are my values. That's what I want to manifest within my life. So you can use that same type of technique when you're going into any situation. Consciously decide, how is it that you want to be in this world? So you say to yourself first thing in the morning, what do you hope for yourself? Or, that's the ritual, but going into a difficult situation, so going into a medical appointment, you may think to yourself, I want to be kind. I want to be clear. I want to be, I want to advocate for myself. I want to get the best possible care. So you're clear about what your intention is within that interaction, for instance. Or sometimes you're really good when you recognize you're really feeling kind of stressed and flustered and kind of out of sorts. You can kind of remember what's most important to you. You can kind of settle that down on the spot. So it's like the memory of the values, my deepest values, and come back home to my deepest values. And that will help you kind of get out of the chaos there. Okay, so I'd actually ask you to join me now. I'm going to do like a 3-minute setting of the intention exercise. So I'm going to take you through like a minute or so of mindfulness, and then we're going to do a little bit of visualization of kind of heart energy. And lastly, you're going to think about, how is it that you want to be in this world? What are your greatest values? And so I'd ask you to do this with me. It will help me settle down. So find yourself in a good position, like solidly sitting on the chair, maybe feet flat on the ground, a nice, strong, upright posture. It's like taking your seat. And you can put your hands on your knees and you can look downwards towards the ground. Sometimes people like to close their eyes as well. I like to do this with an eyes open. And start out with just that kind of mindfulness, that sense of being very curious about the sensations in your body. The feeling of your feet connecting with the floor, that sense of grounding with the earth. The weight of the hands on your knees or your thighs. The weight of the body in the chair, so the kind of sitting bones and how that connects with the chair. And be curious now about your spine. It's solid bone in the middle of your body. And bring your attention now to the level of the heart. What do you feel in the middle of your chest? What does that feel like right now? Perhaps a sense of openness or a rawness, a vulnerability, or a warmth. And that really characterizes our humanness. We have a solid, strong spine and body, and we have a warm, open heart. Now let's just do just a little visualization. Imagine that on the in-breath, you're breathing in a sense of calm and peace. So breathe that in. On the out-breath, kind of release any sense of tension and stress. So you can breathe more slowly than usual, whatever pace feels good for you. Breathing in a sense of calm and peace and love. Invite that into your body. And then on the out-breath, relax, release, and let go. Breathing in calm and peace. And on the out-breath, relaxing, releasing, letting go. Very nice. Very nice. Now imagine that you can warm your heart with a sense of compassion or peace, caring. And sometimes that's easiest to do when you bring to mind a loved one. So as you think of someone that you deeply love, allow your heart to warm. That warm, healing, wondrous energy. So think of your loved one or a pet, someone you deeply care about, maybe at a different time in your life. And allow your heart to warm like the element on a stove. Now bring to mind somebody in your life that you know who's suffering in some way or form. So it might be somebody close to you, might be somebody from afar. And as you think of that person, allow your heart to warm yet again and send them a kind of wish of love or healing energy or a warm sense of a hug, whatever it is. Just extend your heart energy to that person. May they be at peace. May they be free from suffering. Just really wish them well. And again, your heart can warm like the element on a stove. That kind of shining, warm, healing energy is radiating from your heart. Now think of the other people in your life that you really care about and love. So your friends and family and cherished colleagues. And as each person comes to mind, allow your heart to warm again so that you become like a being of light, a warm, healing energy. You're extending that love and peace to each and every person. May they be at peace. May they be free from suffering. Extend that outwards. Now extend that to everybody on the webinar tonight. So we're all here together, affected by myeloma. Send them your deep wishes, your aspirations for healing. May they be healed in whatever way is best for them, body, mind, and spirit. And extend that out again to everybody everywhere in the world who's been affected by myeloma. All over the world. Anybody who has the blood cancer, your unlimited being of light, just allow that to radiate outwards and recognize as you do that, that healing energy is washing over your body as well. right? You're a recipient as well as a transmitter of that healing energy to everybody, everywhere. Now, within that frame of mind, set an intention for yourself. What is it that you value? How do you want to manifest in this world? How do you want to let your spirit out? What do you value most? Where do you want to put your energy and your love and your caring and your compassion? Beautiful. Now release any sense of visualization, coming back home to a sense of being connected to your body, the kind of physicality of your feet on the floor, connecting with the earth, weight of the body in the chair, the physicality of your body. And on the next out breath, allow your mind to expand into the space of the room or up towards the sky, and recognize you're also connected with that sense of possibility and energy and transformation and the realm of healing. And recognize that your good human heart connects the two, the sense of earth connection, practicality below, and the sense of healing, transformation, beautiful healing energy above. Beautiful. Ding. I forgot my chimes, but thanks folks for going through that. You would have had a physiological response by doing that visualization. Your blood pressure would have gone down, your heart rate would have decreased, your immune function would have perked up a little bit. You'd have a lot less adrenaline going through your system. And so you can practice that. And it also helps you to remember what's most important to you, right? And whatever you practice, you get better at. So if you practice being in a sense of peace and calm, there's a neurocircuitry within your brain that gets stronger, and you practice being flustered and stressed and upset, you'll get better and better at that. So it's something called neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to change itself. So we need to practice and be conscious and deliberate and bring your great spirit into the world. No matter what your situation, there's always that opportunity to shine the light. Okay, so that's, I think it's actually very, very important. So hand model of the brain. So if you can see my little picture here, this is the hand model of the brain. And through evolution, if you thought about the spinal cord and then the base of the thumb being the reptilian brain or the fight and flight center, through evolution, you know, that has its purpose to kind of get us out of the way of the car that's coming at you. And then the next level is the limbic system, which is the thumb right here, the tip of the thumb, which is the reward seeking system, the you know, essentially goes out and gets things, and more like the emotional brain, I guess, would be a simplification. And then we have the fingers over top, which is our neocortex. I call it the wise and compassionate brain. And this is the best. When you live in this part, when this is firing on all cylinders and dominating the brain activity, that's the best you. That's the happy, clear thinking you. And we want to spend more of our time in this part of the brain. And interestingly, this part of the brain overlies the limbic system, the emotional brain, the reward seeking brain, right? So when this is firing and this is settling down our anxieties and definitely the flight or flight. And what happens is throughout the day, we go from feeling stressed, anxious, kind of upset, to coming back home to that compassionate and clear thinking mind. And so we flip back and forth all day long. So we're trying to flip our lid less often and come back home more often. And so how do we do that? How is it that you can get yourself in that space of being your best self, your compassionate, wise, happier self? So we set up the conditions, and when we lose it, we come back home more often. So it's the same idea. It's all about you living out of that best part of yourself. So it starts out with creating the conditions for calm, right? Because when we take care of ourselves it actually nourishes that neocortex, the wise and compassionate brain. We're more online in that part of ourselves when we create the conditions. And if we were live, or even if I could watch the chat as I go, I would ask you, how is it that you can nourish your brain? How is it you can get this brain, the 3 pounds of tofu between your ears, to actually function so that you're wired, you're online in terms of the wise and compassionate part. And so there are actually a few kind of activities that actually change your brain function, change how your brain works. And it won't be a surprise to you. It's all the same things that help your health in all the other ways. So exercise. When we exercise, I'm not talking about necessarily going to the gym and pumping iron. It's like you can start out with a 5-minute walk, or a power walk, or doing something fun to get yourself that little slight shorter breath, slight sweat on the brow, and slowly building that up. But when you exercise, you actually release chemicals that are the happy hormones, give you more energy, get you to sleep better, and allows your brain to actually think and remember better, something called brain-derived growth factor. So you're actually exercising and changing the shape and chemistry of your brain. So we're wired for some type of exercise, 30 minutes a day. I'd add to that every hour. And in fact, we'll do it ourselves. In fact, why don't we do it right now? If you guys would stand up and just stretch on the spot. So as you're doing this, I'm going to tell you about something called sedentarism, which is essentially sitting too much. And by sitting too much, we change the fats and sugars in our body, and it causes all sorts of different problems, changes our mood, et cetera, et cetera. So the takeaway is that 5 minutes for every hour of sitting, you need to kind of get up and stretch and move. So I'm asking you to stand up right now and just stretch a little bit. 5 minutes every hour, you're getting up. So you're not sitting all day. You're not watching television for too long. You're not emailing for too long. 5 minutes, stand up, desk, do the things that you have to do in order to do that. So 1, exercise changes the physiology of your brain, releases the happy hormones. You're getting back into your best self. It's paradoxical because I know fatigue is a big part of melanoma. Paradoxically, if you'd start that exercise, get through the treatments more easily, start out with 5 minutes per day, slowly ramp that up, do what you can do, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. Okay, next is pretty obvious as well, that we can feed our brain so that our brain is happier. Or the other way around, we can eat poorly and it profoundly affects our moods in a negative way. And so there's a few ideas. And again, this is probably a half an hour, 45-minute talk, something like called a low glycemic diet, which means the sugar is not spiking to high levels and then coming down to low levels, because both high levels of glucose in your blood and low levels will cause your brain not to work as well. And so by eating complex carbohydrates and having some proteins with your meals, you keep that sugar in the normal range and your brain's able to function better. When the blood sugar drops, whether you don't eat well or you eat the sugary stuff and get a bottom out afterwards, your brain kind of dissociates from its frontal lobe and you get the hangry feeling, and you just can't think or function better. So the brain foods, the omega-3s, the healthy fats, it all can influence your mood and it definitely influence your resilience. So again, it's pretty obvious. Take care of yourself, be proactive on that side. Again, it's a half an hour talk about sleep. You can't force yourself to sleep, but you can create the conditions in which sleep is more, it's like you'll sleep better. And we really aim for 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night, creating the conditions in which you're more likely to sleep. And a lot of the avoidance things that I'm going to talk about shortly will also pertain to sleep. So sleep hygiene, you can affect your sleep cycle. So for instance, when you get up first thing in the morning, try to expose yourself to half an hour light, because the brain tissue just above the kind of back of your eyes picks up on that light and sets a timer for 12 hours later for you to be getting sleepy again. So first thing in the morning, you get that natural light, whether you go outside or look through a window, half an hour sleep. So again, it's a long talk around just the sleep itself. We're going to talk about practicing a relaxation technique. So we did a little bit of that right now. But when you do that, you actually innervate or strengthen the left prefrontal lobe. And that's associated with positive emotions. And that's associated with your wise and compassionate brain. So by practicing that mindfulness technique, you actually feel better, are less stressed, more resilient, better immune function. There's a long list just by this alone, just by that technique alone. So it doesn't necessarily have to be meditation or, the kind of more classic Eastern stuff. It could be like yoga or some Qigong or a visualization or a body scan or a guided meditation. There's lots of different options for you to get into that, recognizing when your brain is chattering away and bringing yourself back to yourself again. You can kind of reverse engineer as well how your brain functions through touch. Yes, it's lovely to have a pet or a partner who would do that for you, but you can also just like touch your hand or touch your neck or touch your face or have a bath. And that again, you're tricking your brain to say, I'm safe, I'm okay. So the touch by itself is healing. So we can do that. And last, I'd say, again, if you have limited energy, do the things that nourish your soul. What is it that brings that kind of sense of joy and appreciation and gratitude into your life? When do you feel that kind of sense of connection and bliss? And oftentimes within relationships, but it can be as simple as getting outside and going for a walk in the park. So there are things that you can do to trick your brain to set up the conditions of calm. And we're doing this because then you'll be more resilient. It's like you're developing a reservoir, a wellspring. There's a good word for you, a wellspring of a residual peace and calm. You just like, it's like the water coming off the duck's back, right? So you're going to develop your feathers so that when the slings in the air of the world come through, you're not going to bite on it as hard and you're not going to flare as much, and you'll be able to recognize it more easily. So the self-care piece is very important here. So then the other part of this then is to avoid the stuff that winds you up, that decreases your resilience. I decided not to listen to the news tonight. I usually listen to radio because I find television news simply too stressful in some sense, it's too much sensationalism. It's just too hard on my psyche. So I don't watch news. I listen to the news, decide not to listen to the news tonight. You're staying away from unnecessary upsetting activities, right? If you can avoid those things, then create the calm in your life by avoiding social media, especially if you're kind of like scanning through lots of pictures, lots of Facebook. Social media can be very helpful if you're connecting directly with another person or particular people, but for the most part, it raises anxiety. Obviously, we want to stay away from the drugs and alcohol and stuff. Okay, so I'm trying to point you towards this idea of being mindful, being able to watch what's happening. Watch yourself, be curious about yourself, see what works, see what doesn't work. That, in fact, the whole talk is this whole idea of what works for you, but you need the information, which is mindfulness, as the starting point there. So I'd ask you again, if it was chatting or in person, how do you know when you're suddenly anxious, stressed, flustered, overwhelmed? What are the cues? What are your particular cues? What's the signature for you? And it can be physical symptoms, right? So typically the stress reaction, that flight, scared, anger, fluster. What happens to your body? Think of the last time when you were like really upset, stressed, scared, worried. Like, press the pause button right now. So just imagine, go back and scan through your body as if you're watching a movie now. What were the symptoms? What were the changes? And typically people would say like the heart's pounding or a change in breathing. this kind of contraction, jittery muscles, aches, achy stomach. It's like any of the constricted throat. So we all have different patterns physically. Same idea. What are the emotions that follow? Right? So what's your emotional energy? When you're in the midst of this scare, what are you experiencing? What are the emotional symptoms? Right? So typically people would say, well, I feel anxious or worried or in fear, but it can come out as like, seeing red, anger, frustration. Sometimes it's feeling, I can just like break down, cry. Sometimes there's like a total numbing off of the emotions, a dissociation. And again, that could be the only cue you get to say, oh, I wound myself up. It can be like, oh, geez, am I ever irritable? Wow, what happened there? So again, curiosity without judgment. You might be able to watch yourself thinking, to have the meta consciousness or observer consciousness to watch the thoughts that come through your mind. And how does your thinking change? If there was a magical program that could type out your thoughts 24/7, and that you get this kind of transcript at the end of the week, and you read over the transcript, what would be the words or sentences that you would read to say, oh yeah, I was really anxious and scared or flustered, stressed at that point in time? What would you be saying? And typically it comes out as, okay, how does the thinking change? I'm sorry. So this is how it changes, first of all. So people typically can't think, they're foggy, they get fixated, fast, manic, thinking in loops. But there's also the content, which is the read over your transcript of what you thought in the past week. And typically that's around blaming. So you're blaming that person, such an idiot, they shouldn't have done that. Or blame yourself, I'm such an idiot, I shouldn't have done that. Or life is totally unfair. Or for instance, when I hear myself swearing in my head, I know I'm having a stress reaction. Or if you're labeling people like that guy's such an idiot, for instance, can be another recognition of the kind of anxiety that's come up there. So what do you do? Okay, so you're in the midst of the fray. Maybe you're going into the medical appointment, or something happens to remind you that, and something you got this kind of stress reaction. First of all, you're not going to get back to perfect. So even though I'm teaching this technique, recognize that you're going to get yourself a little bit more relaxed and feel a sense of empowerment with this. But typically you want to have a plan. You want to have a kind of a strategy. Say, when I get super flustered, when I really have lost it, this is what I'm going to do. The first thing is becoming very mindful. As soon as you think of your mindfulness, you're up into a different part of your brain, up into more of the frontal lobe, or at least the insula and the kind of higher level thinking than in the kind of more primitive stuff. So you get mindful. What does that feel like? What does that feel like within my body? What's happening to my thinking? So as soon as you're there, you're starting to take the bite out of the thoughts that are priming all this. If you can't talk yourself down, I'm going to teach you a breathing technique right now that we're going to go through together. The other one's kind of an interesting one. You can probably use this one in the waiting room more easily. Pretend you're relaxed. So kind of, you can even, right now, you can even slump back in your chair, kind of close your eyes, kind of look down towards the ground, even pretend that you're chewing like gum. Because what your body is doing in that circumstance is saying, I'm not stressed. Because if you were literally stressed and you're really at threat, you would not be doing that, right? So the body is assuming a position of relaxation. It sends a signal up to the brain to say, I'm okay, I'm relaxed. So you're kind of reversing what I call body up or body mind connection. Remember what it's like to feel good. Yeah. When I get through this medical appointment, I'm going to go for a nice walk in the woods. Oh, won't that be a nice feeling, right? So you're remembering what it's like to feel good. I would say it's very important for all of us to have somebody who just will listen. You can preface that conversation by saying something like, I don't want any advice or to correct me or whatever. I just want you to listen to how I'm feeling, right? So you just tell them how you're feeling. Say, I'm having a crappy day, or this was what's worrying me, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't have to necessarily be your partner, but that would be helpful. But one person in your life. Okay, here's the technique. And I guess I would ask you to stand up again if it works for you. I want you to put your hand on your lower abdomen. And now think of a stressful situation again. You're in the midst of like a medical appointment, or something like that where you're flustered. And in your mind, I want you to press the pause button, because this is what you would do in the situation. Typically, you would press the pause and the pause button. You usually don't have to do something exactly at that very moment. Press the pause button. Become very curious of the sensations in your body. In fact, you can do that right now. What does that feel like? If you're standing, it would be good to stand. If you're standing, what does that feel like right now? What does it feel like within your feet, your legs, your gut, your heart, your neck, your head? As soon as you do that, you're decreasing your stress reaction. You're watching as opposed to priming. You're letting go of the catastrophizing mind, coming back home. Now, with the hands in the lower abdomen, I want you to take 4 slow breaths. So when the breathe in, the abdomen rises. When the breathe out, the abdomen falls. And become very curious. What does it feel like to breathe right now? Allowing that sense of breath, breathing out. And try a longer, slower, smoother out breath. Out breath, slow and smooth. You're sending a signal up to your brain. And lastly, then you talk to yourself. You reassure yourself. Sense of wisdom and kindness. I can get through this. I've been in difficult situations before. I have what I need to do to get through this situation as well. I have the strength and resilience to get through the situation. I'm strong internally. Right? So you talk to yourself in a way that's helpful. So just to repeat it, when you recognize that you're really stressed and flustered, and you can sit down now if you want, if you're stressed and flustered, in the midst of it, press the pause button. And then, typically this would take maybe 10 seconds, watching the sensations in your body, the 4 slow breaths, they're sending a message up to your brain to say that you're safe. And then you can talk to yourself in a way that is helpful. Look, one thing at a time, I can get through this, right? And the sense of kindness and compassion in that voice as well. So we want to practice relaxation. So that's the other part of this, because as we get better at mindfulness, it's the same pathways. It's the better self. It's the better you. There's emotional regulation, and you're more compassionate. You're more clear thinking. So practicing a relaxation technique creates the wellspring of the relaxation that you tap into when you are feeling flustered and scared and upset. Okay. Another kind of really interesting part of this is not to fight against our own anxiety, right? What's your relationship towards your anxiety? Most people is like anxiety. Oh, I have those feelings. I want to make it go away. It's really bad. This is bad for my life. And you just kind of, it turns into a fight. And I need to reduce this. Well, paradoxically, you will reduce your anxiety. You will feel stronger and better if you're able to accept it. So typically, the other side is my life is toxic. This is too much. Or if you're able to accept your anxiety, use the energy of anxiety to do productive things, or to at least question, why is it I'm getting upset? What's happening internally here that's causing me to feel, upset? There's an opportunity. Something important is at stake. I can use this energy. Anxiety can be helpful for me. And even just believing that can really change how your brain works. And psychologically, you get stronger and anxiety becomes less of an issue for you. So there's this kind of radical acceptance idea. And not that you're agreeing with your thoughts, you just let your thoughts be and not kind of buy into them. You don't have to believe everything that you think, for instance. Okay, so I want to talk to you just about going to the source of your anxiety. So there's the next thing called cognitive behavior, or I call it reframing, right? And we're not trying to just slap on a happy face and just be positive. We're actually going to use our intelligence and our wisdom and be realistic and open. The idea is that our thoughts influence how we feel. If you change your thoughts, you change how you feel. You get stronger. We can always reframe. And go through any situation. You always say something like, I can learn from this. I can get stronger from this. I always have an opportunity to be appreciative of the things that I do have. I'm not going to go through all the cognitive distortions, but there's a whole kind of science of how we regress, especially when we're stressed. We don't think as clearly as we should, and these are some of the cognitive distortions here. But what I do want to do is actually take you through a few examples. So the point is, you can change the way you think, you can change your underlying beliefs, change how you look at yourself, the life, and others in the world. So really, you can change. It's not a fixed reality. You can actually change your perception and still be wise about it. And ultimately, if you do that, you will feel better and you'll be more effective. You'll be happier, healthier even. And we do this through a technique called, it's reframing based on David Byrne's book, Feeling Good. You see there's a situation up top, which is just the kind of reality. And then requires mindfulness of distressing thoughts and a humility that sometimes we do regress in terms of our thinking. And the middle column is how we work with those thoughts. And ultimately, what we want to do is be able to reframe more easily, right? And the reframing is acknowledging, looking at the situation from a bigger perspective, a wise perspective, and then being encouraging of yourself. Okay. So you're thinking about an upcoming medical appointment, right? There's I'm getting a little bit of allergic reaction here. There's nothing kind of emotion, it's just the fact that you have to walk to see your doctor or go in to see your doctor. That's just kind of a clear truth. And then we place thinking on top of that. And if our thoughts are, I can't handle this, this is too much, my life is totally out of control, nothing good comes from medical visits. If you thought that, I can't handle this, then it would cause you to feel worse. So when you recognize that kind of repetitive, automatic, distressing thought, then you can work with the second column, which is what emotions follow this way of thinking. Well, it's like a stress reaction. It's kind of a fear. It's a frustration, a despair. And your body either has a stress reaction or kind of shuts down a little bit. It's not helpful to think this way. This is not getting you better or stronger. And then you ask yourself, well, how is this exaggerated? I can't handle this. Well, actually, you are handling this. You are here. You are doing what you need to do. This is too much. Well, it could be a lot, but it's not too much. My life is totally out of control. Well, you might feel out of control, but your life is not totally out of control. Nothing good ever happens from these medical visits. Well, your doc could be giving you good news, help you with the treatment, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see how there's an exaggerated issue. And so when you hear yourself think that, then you begin by acknowledging, oh, this is tough. Look from a bigger perspective and being encouraging yourself. And that would come out as something like, oh yeah, this is tough. I am worried, but there's no use in me getting myself worked up. I can just take this one step at a time and I can find the good in each moment, right? So that would be, you're not saying this is nothing. You're saying, this is tough, but let's just do one thing at a time. I can do this and I can find some good even in each moment, right? So there's a reframe using wisdom and compassion. Another example would be hearing that somebody has relapsed. And you think to yourself, if that person relapsed, the myeloma came back, then it's going to happen to me right now, right away. So you can see again, an exaggerated feeling. It's like a fortune teller problem. What emotions, if you think that way, the emotions that come up would be like fear and stress, anxiety. You get a stress reaction in your body. It's not helpful. And it's exaggerated because you don't know how you're going to do. The future is in some sense unknown for your situation. So it's an exaggeration. We acknowledge, you say, yeah, it is scary, but I don't know what will happen in the future. Worrying is not going to help. I can learn to live my best life now. This is a difficult one. I'm thinking about the family members. I hate this melanoma. It's ruining our lives and all the things we do together, right? And again, my heart goes out to the difficult situations. Difficult situations happen. But this is an exaggeration, right? We just have to recognize that, yes, it can be 95% true, but let's work with the 5% extra unnecessary stuff. So we get depressed or frustrated, angry when we think this way, causes a stress reaction. It's not helpful. It's exaggerated because it's ruining our lives and all the things we can do together. So things definitely have changed, but you still have your life together and it's still possible to stay connected. So how do we reframe that? So the anger, rage, hate only make me feel worse, right? When you think that way, you're just getting worse. And then it just adds that kind of sense of stress. If you're able to accept the truth of the situation, you work with the truth first. I can enjoy the time that we do have. We may not be as active, but time together is very precious. Again, you look at what you have. The reframe comes to what you have. So I think it's very important to look at our fears directly. And you might go chat with somebody at Wellspring or counselor at the cancer center, but just to have that clear look at what's causing the fear, because you can reframe that. And when we release that kind of sense of fear, it gives us energy, life force energy, so we can enjoy our life more. And so we ask ourselves, what scares us the most and why does it scare us? Is it death? Is it dying? Is it suffering? Is it afterlife? All these things. I know it's a difficult topic to talk about and to think about, but by going there and really kind of having that fuller conversation, releasing the kind of sense of grief that can be with the diagnosis, you really release that sense of, the negative emotions, the kind of dark cloud around that. And there's healthy grief. This is the other thing that I think is something that we don't talk about, is that any change is going to produce grief. It's normal that we're going to have losses in our lives, some level of grief. We're always, things are always changing. We're always shattering of expectations. And so there's different types of grief that we can release through conversation. And grief has a natural course of things. If you allow yourself to mourn, allow yourself to express that, allow yourself to be whatever emotions are happening, it will flow through you. And it's not like you're going to get stuck in grief, for the rest of your life. You can actually let that flow through you. And then something buoys you up, something internally, something a deep spiritual level comes in and you can reconnect with what's most important. And obviously, if you're having prolonged grief or debilitating grief, then, that's the point where it's good to connect with a professional and get more help around it. Healthy anger, same idea. Anger has its wisdom, right? It's saying, something's wrong here. Instead of outbursting, we can recognize, go to the source of the anger, notice the thoughts, I'm projecting this against myself or others. In what way is it exaggerated? And then we can learn to express that anger. This is the need that is not being fulfilled. And so again, to recognize we're human, we're going to have these difficult emotions there. Or naming your emotion, understanding your emotions. If you're saying, I'm feeling stressed, well, what does that really mean? Where's the source? Exploring it. Does it mean I'm anxious about what the test results are going to be? Or I'm frustrated that I can't do what I want to do in the circumstance? Or I'm sad, this is stressful, or I'm disconnected. There's lots of different ways that we can feel stressed. So again, to develop that emotional intelligence allows us to be open, authentic, and connect with others to talk about these things. And lastly, I just want to talk about just this idea of releasing the difficult emotions. So we're doing deeper work here. So we're questioning, why is that emotion coming up? Do I need to take action? Is there something like, somebody's like anger has its place. If somebody is being mean to you, it's important to stand up and say, no, stop that. Like, I don't accept this, right? So there's a circumstance where action is required. But we need to honor our emotions, right? So the griefs that we go through, so you express that frustration by sharing in a healthy way, and to kind of question, to what degree is this a distortion? Can it be reframed, or can it be let go of? Can I let go of this and say, it's important not to go there, and to simply let go of the thought or the situation that's causing that. I was going to take you through a self-compassion exercise. And maybe I'll just give you the skin in this, not take you through this, because we're kind of at the hour point right now. If you want to make these good psychological changes, if you want to be able to work with stress and anxiety more easily, it's really important to be kind to yourself. Through kindness to ourselves, we actually are better able to make those transformations. And so when those difficult thoughts and emotions come up, you recognize it, set the boundaries, be kind to yourself, take the appropriate action, but it's all done without a sense of judgment, without a kind of second arrow of fighting of that. Okay, so just to say, there's self-compassion that really can make a difference in terms of what you can do. And I guess I can come back in another day, take you through that exercise. And I'll finish off with, our charity has written a book called The Healing Circle. It's the stories of people, there's some myeloma characters here as well, who've gone through a weekend retreat. So we have the teachings of the weekend retreat, which empower people levels of body, mind, and spirit. And every second chapter is a true story of somebody who's attended the weekend. So if you want to go to our website, you can order that book. It's been given fantastic reviews.